Well, MLB free agency is officially open, and maybe a week or two ago, I put out a video saying what I would do if I was the Mets to, become a contender in 2026. And today, what I'd like to do is tell you what I think the realistic expectations are this offseason and what I think the Mets' plan is. Now, if you're new here and you end up liking this type of content, please subscribe, give me a like, comment what you think they're going to do this offseason. But this is kind of what I think is their plan, right? I gave you my opinions already. This is what I think is a realistic plan for them. Now, right now, going into this offseason, the Mets are currently already tied up in about $240 million worth of payroll. That includes the arbitration numbers for the guys that are going to be back. So $240 million is already baked into this 2026 roster. Now, you might be thinking that's a lot of money, right? That's basically only gives you $100 million to work with going into next season with a lot of holes to fill, especially in the pitching staff. But I think the Mets can do some things to open up some more space for them. First things first, I think Jeff McNeil is someone that has to go. It's addition by subtraction. I don't care what you get for him. Get a bag of balls. Just get his salary out of here and get him off of the team. I just think he's bad for the clubhouse. I like him as a player. I think he's very versatile. He plays multiple positions, but he's declining. He's getting older. He doesn't hit like he used to, and he's not very good at those positions, even though he can play a bunch of them. So I think Jeff McNeil and get his $12.5 million off of the books, it opens up a little bit more space to work with. Also, I think the Mets trade Kodai Senga. I don't think they're very happy with Kodai Senga right now. I don't think they can really trust that he's going to give them anything. He's injured all the time, and even when he is healthy, you have to work around his schedule, and I think they're just done with the Senga experience, and I think he still does have some value on the market, on the trade market, because he's a pitcher who has a lot of potential and is only making about $15 million. So I think someone would jump at him. I don't think you're getting a lot back. I don't think you're getting a big-time prospect or anything, but maybe a lottery ticket, a low-end kind of prospect or two. But you're not going to get a lot, but it's getting $15 million off the books. And he wasn't really part of the team last year anyway with all of his injuries. Also, one guy I think isn't talked about very much, but I think it's someone that the Mets would have no problem trading, and that's David Peterson. David Peterson's scheduled to make about $9 million this coming season in arbitration, and I think the experience with him has been kind of very up and down. He was very bad when he first came up. Then he kind of turned into a reliable starter, and at some points was looking like one of the better lefty starters in the game. And then he just completely fell apart last year, and he just wears down, and I think honestly, I think we would have no problem getting rid of Peterson. Maybe you could still get something for him. Maybe he's part of a deal for a bigger trade that you're able to make. I just think that David Peterson's days in New York should probably be over. And I like Peterson, don't get me wrong. I think he's a decent starter, but he's too inconsistent to stick around. So I think that's a good way to save some money. And if you make all three of those trades without keeping any of that salary, you're opening up another $36.5 million for the 2026 season. Now, that brings your commitments from $240 million to about $204 million, and now you're working with $135, maybe $140 million to fill a lot of holes. Now, that seems like a lot of money, but it's really not considering all the holes that the Mets have. Now, to the people who say that the Mets aren't going to spend any money and David Stearns is going to go dumpster diving, while I am starting to agree with you on David Stearns, I'm not the biggest fan in the world right now. I think the Mets, after the embarrassing collapse that they had last year and just the complete meltdown and missing the playoffs, they have to go for it, especially because after this season, we might not have baseball for a while. So the Mets are going to go for it this year. I have no doubt that they're going to spend money and at least get to close to, if not up to, last year's total overall spending. I think they're still going to carry around a $340 million payroll, maybe a little bit less. Maybe they want to drop it a little bit. But I don't see them just saying, we're going to go with some kids and see what happens. No, they're going to go for it. Steve Cohen is going to be upset that they missed the playoffs. I'm sure he's telling David Stearns that he has to spend money. He has to go out and get players to fill out this roster, players that we know are going to perform. And I think the first thing I'm going to talk about here is pitching, because we all know that pitching is what killed us last year. Pitching was terrible. The starting rotation, the bullpen, everybody was bad. So the first thing I think has to happen, and will happen, is that the Mets will re-sign Edwin Diaz to a 5-year, $110 million contract. That's about $22 million a year. And the reason is there's no better option. There's no one else that's going to give you the same amount of production that Edwin Diaz does. He is the best closer in baseball when he's healthy and performing at the top of his game. There's nobody better in baseball. You're not going to get another guy this offseason that's going to compare to Edwin Diaz. You want Ryan Helsley, you want Suarez, you want Devin Williams. Like, those guys are not an attractive pivot from Edwin Diaz. So I think Edwin Diaz will be re-signed. He has to be re-signed, and he'll get about $22 million a year. Also, you need a setup guy to go along with Edwin Diaz. You need that lockdown eighth inning guy. We tried it last year. David Stearns traded for Ryan Helsley at the break. It didn't work out. Helsley wasn't very good. I think he ends up walking. And I think what the Mets do is they sign a guy who was just had his option not picked up, and that's Peter Fairbanks from the Rays. I think they get him on about a 3-year, $36 million deal. That's $12 million AAV. I think he takes a little bit less money because they're going to give him 3 years now. If they want to go 2 years, maybe that becomes $28 million and it's 14 AAV. But it's going to be between $12 and $14 million in annual salary. And I think he could be a lockdown setup guy for them. A big right-hander who throws hard. I think he's kind of the perfect guy to put in front of Edwin Diaz to lock down the 8th and the 9th. And then I think with the reliever market after that, you're just going to sign a few of those guys. You're going to get some guys on a $3 or $4 million 1-year deal. You're going to pick up 2 or 3 of those guys. You're going to spend between $8 and $12 million. I just have it at about $12 million to round out your bullpen. And then if you look at your bullpen with your closer as Diaz, your setup as Fairbanks, you have your solid quality lefty in Brooks Raley. At some point, Minter will be back next year, another solid lefty in the bullpen. And they just re-signed Jose Castillo, who, they picked him up on waivers. And I think they'll give him a real shot. They should have never let him go last year. He was a really good reliever for them. I think he had an under 3 ERA, and then they just DFA'd him and let him walk. But Castillo will be back, and I think he'll be given an opportunity to compete in that bullpen. So I think you could go out and sign another couple of right-handed pitchers in that $3, $4, $5 million on a 1-year deal range. And then your bullpen's pretty much done. The back end of that bullpen looks pretty solid with Diaz, Fairbanks, Raley, and Minter. Just get a couple more right-handers in there, and you have the makings of a really solid bullpen. Now, the most important thing this offseason is getting an ace. And we've heard talk about Tarek Skubal and Hunter Green and maybe signing Dylan Cease or something like that. I think it's going to come via trade, but I don't think it's going to be Skubal. Not because I don't think the Mets would want Skubal. I just really don't think he's going to be traded. Now, if I'm wrong, I think the Mets will be involved and are probably the favorite to land him. But I just don't think he's going to be traded. But I think the Mets will make a trade for Sandy Alcantara from the Marlins. I think that there's some guys to me who just feel like they're destined to be on a certain team, and I've always felt that Alcantara was going to end up a Met. I don't know why. I just always felt that way. I don't think you're going to have to give up a ton to get him. I think you're going to have to give up some high-end minor leaguers, guys who are maybe ready to contribute pretty soon. But I don't think you're going to have to give up Benj or Tong in a trade for Alcantara. I just don't. And I probably wouldn't, because you don't know really what you're always going to get with Alcantara. He's going to throw innings, but there's some injury history. There's some inconsistency history. But at his best, he's one of the best pitchers in baseball. He gets a lot of ground balls. He's not a huge strikeout guy, but he also doesn't walk too many, doesn't give up home runs very often. He's more of a ground ball pitcher. And he makes about $17 million for this upcoming season, which is very team-friendly for a guy who's going to be at the top of your rotation. Is he truly an ace at this point in his career? I don't know. Probably not. But he has the potential to return to that level, and I think the Mets will look at that as something to go after. I also think that they're going to need to add more to that pitching rotation, especially after you just traded 2 of your guys in Peterson and Kodai Senga. And I think the guy that they can get on a Stearns-type deal is a guy like Michael King. Michael King, I think you can get for about 3 years, $75 million, $25 million AAV with opt-outs. He had an injury-plagued season in 2025. He's had kind of an up-and-down year. I could definitely see him wanting to maybe get a 3-year deal with opt-outs. an opt-out after the first year. If he pitches well, he can go back into the market and get more money in more years. And I think that could be kind of a Stearns special type of contract. So I think Michael King probably is part of their plans if he's looking for that type of deal, and you're going to give him about $25 million to be your second or third starter. And then honestly, I think you're kind of done in terms of starting pitching. I don't think you're going to get a third starter. Maybe you get a depth piece somewhere. But if you look at that starting rotation, Alcantara, McLean, King, the top three in that is pretty formidable. You might not have Tarek Skubal level pitcher or Max Fried with the Yankees or Garrett Crochet with the Red Sox. There's not too many of those guys out there. And I think that top three in a playoff series, if McLean becomes what we think he's going to become, you're talking about a really formidable 1, 2, 3 in your rotation. And then you have Clay Holmes as your number 4. I like having Clay Holmes as my number 4 pitcher. That sounds pretty good to me. If he's your number 4, the rest of your staff should be pretty good. Now at the 5 spot, you're going to deal with Manaea, maybe Sproat or Tong later on, Christian Scott, if they're not part of the trade, maybe for Alcantara. You have guys ready and waiting if Manaea falters. We don't know what we're going to get out of Manaea. He was terrible last year, and he was injured. So you don't know what you're going to get. At best, maybe he returns to somewhat of what he was in 2024. If not, you have guys waiting to take that 5th spot. So I think this, with the money that you have to spend, is a good plan of getting this pitching staff into a respectable level. And honestly, that top 3 looks pretty good to me. Now, in saying all this, we just spent $90 million basically on pitching out of, the 135 or 140 that we said we had. So the Mets have about $40 to $50 million left to play with here. And I don't know how they're going to necessarily do that with all the holes they have on offense. But right now, just on pitching, touching nothing on the offense, you're at about $292 million. Now, I struggled a lot with coming up with some offensive, some position player signings and trades this offseason. Because honestly, I think the person who fits best in this lineup, who you should be spending the money on, in my personal opinion, is Pete Alonso. And honestly, right now, if you put a gun to my head today and said, do you think Alonso will be back? I would say no. If you've heard from, remember from David Stern's press conference at the end of the season with, run prevention and trying to get better on not only pitching but defense, Pete Alonso doesn't really fit the bill. Now, if Pete Alonso decided or he agreed to be a full-time DH, I think the Mets would be involved all day. Pete Alonso isn't likely to accept that. And he also wants a lot of years, and I don't think the Mets are willing to go as many years as he wants. I just don't think the Mets will be the highest bidder for Pete Alonso, and I think that Pete Alonso is going to go to the highest bidder. So I really am kind of 60% that he's not coming back. So I did this without Pete Alonso. Sorry for anyone who really wants him. I do too. I just don't think it's going to happen. I'm just being honest. Now, like I said, there's about $40 to $50 million to play with offensively, and if we're not re-signing Alonso, that's a pretty decent amount. But you're really only going to fill 2 of the 4 spots that you have holes in. Right now, you have a hole without Alonso at first base, second base, because you traded McNeil, center field, and DH. Now, DH obviously can be filled with guys rotating through, whether it's Vientos or whoever. You can filter through DH. But if you're looking to get better defensively at first base, I think the answer there is Okamoto from Japan. He will be posted, not Murakami. I know a lot of people really want Murakami. He's not a good defensive player, and if you're going to sign Murakami, why not just re-sign Pete Alonso? That makes no sense to me, Murakami. He doesn't play good defense. Yes, he's a big-time power guy, and he has a lot of potential. He also has a lot of bust potential as well. The guy I'd go with is Okamoto on a 4-year, $60 million deal. That's $15 million annual, AAV. And he plays great defense at first base. He has power. He is a consistent hitter. We don't know what he's going to be, obviously. You don't know how a guy's going to translate from Japan to the U.S. It's a big step. It's a big change in competition. So could he be a 250 hitter with 15 home runs and 40 RBI? Sure. But I think his potential is probably 260 to 270 with 20 to 25 home runs, maybe knock in 60 or 70 runs. and play really good first base defense, I think David Stearns would sign up for that instead of getting Alonso, as long as you're replacing a bat somewhere else as well. And I think at second base, you're probably going to stick with Acuna, Mauricio, Jet Williams if he's not made in a put in a trade for Alcantara or anyone else. I think he's going to be fine with playing good defense at second base. With Acuna, obviously the guy has not hit much, but he plays great defense. Maybe Jet is ready early on in the season and he comes up and maybe he's a better hitter and can play good defense. I think second base is going to be their young guys. They're going to just stick with their young guys at second base. Now, if you talk about center field, and this is one that I had the biggest problem with, only because I have the Mets signing Cody Bellinger for 6 years, $170 million. It's a $28 million AAV. And the reason I have an issue with this, first off, is I don't think he's leaving the Yankees. I think the Yankees want him back. He wants to be back on the Yankees. He had a good year there. Why wouldn't he want to go back? But maybe they go after Tucker and maybe Cody Bellinger gets lost. I saw some reports that they might be interested in Luis Robert. So maybe they're looking to move on or upgrade. I don't know. Seems like an easy decision to have Cody Bellinger go back to the Yankees, but I think there was some reports, or before the season even ended, that Cody Bellinger might be the Mets' number one priority in free agency. And if that's the case, maybe they're willing to overpay for him. Maybe it becomes more than 6 and 170. Maybe they go to 180 or 190. I don't know. But if he really is a priority and you're looking to add defense and have a bat in there that's going to give you 25 or 30 home runs, then maybe Cody Bellinger is the guy to do that. I don't think he's a great center fielder, but he's good enough. He's a great corner outfielder. Maybe he's there and plays center until Benj is ready, and then Benj plays center, and then you move Bellinger to left, and maybe Nimmo DHs a little bit, because we'd love to get Nimmo out of the field. He's not very good. Maybe that's the plan. Maybe the plan is, let's have Benj play center field at some point, have Bellinger play there until he's ready, and then maybe move Bellinger to left, Nimmo DH, along with Vientos possibly, maybe left-right swap there. I don't know. But if you're going to look for defense, then I think Bellinger is the guy to go for. Also, then you look at DH. I think it's going to be Vientos, Nimmo. You're going to filter guys in and out of there. I don't think you're really going to look to fill that spot. Now, just signing those two guys on offense, that's $43 million. That's the rest of your budget. That gives the Mets a $335 million payroll. Now, there's a little bit of a difference between last year's payroll and this year's payroll. Maybe you give a little bit more to a reliever. Maybe you get a higher-end reliever. Instead of just one of those $2 or $3 or $4 million options, maybe you go $5 or $6 or $7 million a year options. I don't think you're going to be able to do a ton offensively. And to be honest with you, I hate this. I hate this lineup. I don't like it at all. It's very lefty-heavy with your middle-of-the-order guys. If you look at this lineup with Bellinger and Okamoto, Lindor's leading off, Soto's hitting second, Bellinger's hitting third. Is Nimmo hitting fourth? Are you going to have 3 lefties in a row? If not, are you putting Vientos in the 4 spot? No, he's not a cleanup hitter. He hasn't proven that. Are you putting Okamoto in the cleanup spot? I don't know. Are you really that? Are you going to throw Okamoto, who's never played in the major leagues, in the cleanup spot? I don't know. Then you have Beatty, Alvarez, Acuna. I just don't love this lineup. There's not enough pop in it. There's no protection really for Soto. I mean, if you look at what happened last year when Soto left the Yankees to go to the Mets, and everyone said, "Oh, Bellinger is the replacement for Soto. We're fine. We got Bellinger." Well, how'd that work out? You didn't go as far in the playoffs. They weren't as good of a team. Yes, they were very good offensively, and a lot of that has to do with Aaron Judge being the best offensive player in baseball. But I don't love this lineup. Yes, it's longer. Yes, it's deeper, and it's going to maybe get a little bit more hits, and maybe it's a little bit more of an exciting brand of baseball, maybe a little less swing and miss, a little less strikeout. But you're missing pop in the middle of that lineup, and that's why I think Pete Alonso is the most important player to this team right now. And I think they're going to let him walk, unfortunately. But I do get wanting to lengthen the lineup, maybe leaving some opportunities open for some younger guys to come up and perform. I just don't love this lineup, to be honest with you. But overall, that's what I think they're going to do this year. I think they're going to focus on defense and getting on base and not necessarily look for the home run or the pop. We'll see how that all works out. I might even be wrong. Listen, they could sign someone in a month from now and, Alonso could be back, or they could go out and sign Kyle Schwarber. I don't know. I thought about Schwarber in this too. Could he be an option at DH? Maybe, but I don't think so. I don't think that's really Stearns' MO to sign a guy who hits 240 and has no position. At least if you sign Pete Alonso to be a DH, you can stick him at first base, and yeah, he might not be good there, but he's functional at the position. Kyle Schwarber's not functional in any position in the field, so I don't see Schwarber as a real option. And overall, I just don't love this. I love the pitching. I'm perfectly fine with the pitching, especially if Skubal is available and we replace Alcantara with Skubal. That would be great, but I don't really think he's going to be. Overall, I think this is a more realistic view of the offseason, whether we like it or not. But anyway, that's really all I got. Let me know in the comments what you think. Do you think I'm off base here? Do you think Alonso will be back? I know it's like 50-50 with Mets fans. Like, half of us really want him back and half of us just want him gone. I understand wanting to change the team, but I don't think Alonso is really the problem. I'd much rather have a chance to trade Nimmo, but you're not going to be able to trade Nimmo. He makes too much money, and he's a declining player in his mid-30s at this point. Nobody's really going to take that contract, and he has a no-trade clause, so he basically decides where he wants to go. So there's not much you can do, and I think this is a shakeup of the team that maybe David Stearns is going to want. So yeah, like I said, that's all I got. If you're still here, you like this, please subscribe, give me a like, comment what you think, and until next time, let's go Mets.